Good morning, and welcome to WZZ News. This is Mina, Ghobrial.
And I'm Jessica Zakkak.
In today's show, we'll be looking onto the Great War. This will contain footage from news reports we have made in the past 4 years, along with our usual live reports.
It was a devastating war that affected the lives of millions of civilians in multiple countries.
The Great War had started with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie, who had just arrived after a visit with German Emperor William II. They were invited to watch the maneuvers of Austrian troops in Bosnia. On the way to the city, the procession of cars had to drive relatively slowly, which played right into the hands of the attackers that lay in wait. We have exclusive footage of this tragedy taking place. Play the clip, please. Sophie and Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, province of Bosnia. Your journey begins now. Come on, guys, that's beautiful. Miles up the coast. 32 miles up the coast.
That's enough.
Something has troubled the great Sophie.
This had taken place on June 28, 1914, after the assassination. Austria-Hungary ordered Serbia to pursue the Balkan, the Serbian terrorist group who were supposedly responsible for this murder.
But we know this was not the first attempt to take this man's life. Live at the scene of the crime, Diana will tell us that story.
Thank you, Mina. The first assassination attempt failed due to the quick reaction of the Austrian heir. Out of the corner of his eye, Franz Ferdinand saw something black flying toward him and raised his arms in defensive gestures, thus knocking the hand grenade out of the car. It landed on the car behind him, injuring the two passengers. The perpetrator tried to commit suicide by getting a pill, but it was too old, so it only made it sick. Thanks, back to the studio. On September 4th,
Thanks, Diana. On July 23, 1914, Austria delivered a 48-hour ultimatum to Belgrade, demanding that Austrian investigators be appointed to pursue those behind the assassination. Even though the Serbian government fulfilled this request as well as various others, the response was not enough for the government in Vienna. Francis Joseph I also backed a declaration of war on Serbia.
And soon Germany sided with Austria-Hungary in the war. To defend Serbia, Russia declared war on Austria-Hungary and Germany. On July 31, 1914, the German Empire gave France an ultimatum. France was to remain neutral. However, this ultimatum was ignored, and France joined forces with Russia. Soon multiple countries had started to declare war on each other to take sides, and this was known as the Alliance system.
The Austrian military instead acted as if it had been waiting for an opportunity to push Emperor Francis Joseph I into an immediate military reprisal against Serbia. In this, he had the support of the German military command, German Emperor Chancellor von Witthen-Haulig sent a massive to Vienna in the equivalent of an open letter making case for war against Serbia. His Majesty Emperor stood in accord with his federal duties and old friendships, loyal and brave to the side of Austria. The letter read that Europe would become a large-scale fire, but the government decided otherwise. But for now, we must focus on the issues in the homeland.
Soon after the war began, Woodrow Wilson declared policy of neutrality. The U.S. would not take sides in the conflict. It would offer loans and sell weapons and supplies to both sides. In a message to Congress on August 19, 1914, Wilson urged Americans to remain impartial in thought as well as action. The European war, he said, is one with which we had nothing to do, which causes cannot touch. We have an interview with Woodrow Wilson from the reporter Diana Zarazuoa, and over to you, Diana.
Thanks, Mina. Here we are with President Woodrow Wilson. President, what are your thoughts on the disastrous state of Europe?
America has no interest in being engulfed in European affairs. We decide to move all these disastrous things from Europe and not to take it to the United States.
So you're saying that we should let them fight alone?
Yes, but we still do fear for Europe. I mean, we still trade and supply them with ammunition, and to keep reasonable ties with Europe.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Now back to the studio.
In 1914, more than 32 million Americans, a full one-third of the population, were either foreign-born or the children of foreign-born parents. Many of these Americans had strong emotional ties to their homelands and found it hard to remain neutral. Germans and Austrian Americans were sympathetic to the Central Powers. Irish Americans also sided with the Central Powers out of their long-standing hatred of the British. The majority of Americans, however, favored the Allies.
The war at sea started with a British blockade of ships headed for Germany. British ships turned back any vessels carrying weapons, food, or other vital supplies to Central Powers, even ships from neutral nations such as the United States. President Wilson complained to the British about the policy of stopping neutral ships, but did not threaten to take any action.
Where are you using messed up color pencils? Are they just messing up your artwork? Well, try something new. Get rid of that old brand and replace it with Crayloa. It'll change your life. With 18 years old to order. Products rated E for everyone. Order now for only 5 cents. Supplies are limited and only available for limited time. Crayloa crayons. Send a letter to 123 Color Road with your name and payment, or send a telegram to 1111 201 123 1234. Remember to ask for Jessica. Crayola. Color on.
That's not happy, that's deranged.
I know.
Now look happy.
I don't know how to look happy.
Smile, punk! This kid can't smile. Smile at the camera.
In February 1915, Germany found a way to challenge the British blockade: submarine attacks. Their deadly new weapon was a U-boat. The German Navy hoped this new weapon would break the British blockade and at the same time stop vital supplies from reaching the Allies. In early 1915, Germany declared the waters around the British war zone. Within this zone, German U-boats could sink enemy ships without warning. Because British ships sometimes disguised themselves by flying the flags of neutral nations, neutral ships going into the zone were also at risk.
On May 7, 1915, a U-boat sank the British liner Lusitania without warning. Among the 1,198 dead were 128 Americans. Germany tried to absolve itself from blame by arguing that the ship was armed and carrying weapons and ammunition. The second charge is not true. Nonetheless, former President Theodore Roosevelt denounced Germany's actions as murder on the high seas. In an agreement called the Sussex Pledge, Germany promised to spare all lives in future U-boat attacks on merchant ships. But it attached a condition: the United States must force Britain to stop its illegal blockade. Now over to Wahhaj with an interesting story.
Thanks, Mina. Wilson had hoped the Germans would back down, but his hopes were dashed in late February 1917. Britain got a hold of a note sent in code by German Foreign Minister Arthur Zimmermann to the German minister in Mexico. Zimmermann suggested that if the United States entered the war, Mexico and Germany should become allies. Germany would then help Mexico regain lost territory in New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona. The Zimmermann note created a sensation in the United States and stirred anti-German feeling across the nation. The American public had felt insulted by this secret plan against our nation. Wilson had declared war on the Central Powers, and Congress had approved it in Washington, D.C. on April 2nd, 1917. It was a huge step for America, and many Americans who were from the countries and the Central Powers have somewhat ignored. Now back to you, Mina.
Now we have a live interview with President Wilson and Diana Zarazuoa.
So, President Woodrow Wilson, what made you declare war on the Central Powers?
I was appointed President of the United States to protect them, and I feel as if this decision will do so. Now, if you will excuse me, I have to go away.
But President...
Thanks, Diana. We'll be back right after this short break.
Aren't you just sick and tired of that one stain in your bathroom? Using that ordinary brand doesn't seem to do any. You flush, you clean, over and over again, but it's still there. Well, now we have a product that can change your life completely. It'll get rid of that stain in one shot. Clorox. It's a new way to clean. Just pour a little on, flush, and watch all the stains disappear. Just like magic. Get your bottle of Clorox today. Clean like never before. Only $2.
And we're back. So now, as you can see, war can bring a lot of conflict to our nation. Right after Russia surrendered to Germany with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, this caused even more hardship on the Allies, and they're taking heavy casualties thus far in the war.
Throughout the war, our soldiers have fought for us and have their lives claimed throughout this war. Nationalism, the love and support of one's country, has always existed. In this era, however, it was to take part in the creation of one of the most famous wars in history. Since so much pride was devoted to countries, it made the possibilities of peace between past rivals less probable. It also meant that most nations, especially the great powers, would rather fight a war than back down from a rival's diplomatic provocation. In effect, nationalism was also a contributing factor to the ally system. No country feels comfortable being in a war alone. And with the growing militaries in almost every country, allies provide much comfort.
The major military engagement of the Great War was the Battle of Verdun, which is a 10-month-long ordeal between the French and German armies. The battle was part of an unsuccessful German campaign to take the offensive on the Western Front. Now down to Wahhaj for more on that story.
Armies suffered incredibly with an estimated 540,000 French and 430,000 German casualties, and no strategic advantages were gained for either side. The Battle of Verdun is considered one of the most brutal events of Great War, and the site itself remembered as the battlefield with the highest density of dead per square yard. As the Battle of the Somme was being planned and the Germans staged a massive attack against the French fortress near the town of Verdun-sur-Meuse. Though the German goal was to capture the town, a much simpler one was even more apparent. Simply kill so many French soldiers that would break the French morale and force them to abandon the fight. The French, though, stubbornly defended Verdun and inflicted horrific casualties with the Germans, while suffering horrific casualties of their own in return. Nearly 40 million artillery shells were exchanged during the battle in Port, some of which are still visible today, and popularized the French battle cry, "They shall not pass." Verdun came to be the French and Germans what the Somme was to the British, a symbol of the honors of the war in general. French lost some 542,000 casualties, while the Germans lost 435,000. By November of 1916, Forts Rocks, Fort Settlement, and Fort Douaumont had been reclaimed for France. By December, the French had advanced to the February 1916 lines, the original position. No new advantage had been gained for either side. Now back to you in the studio!
On September 4th, 1914, the rapid advances of the German army through Belgium and northern France caused a panic in the French army and troops, where they were rushed from Paris in a taxi. Combined with the BEF, British Expeditionary Forces, the Germans were eventually halted and the war settled in a familiar defense attacks. Thanks, Mina. Now back to you.
Thank you, Diana. Now another interesting story waits for Wahhaj.
Battles fought around the Ypres salient during the war. The first in 1914 was an amendment by the VEF, the rapid services made by Germans. The second in 1915 was notable for the first use of poison gas by the Germans. However, it was the long-planned offensive of July 31st, 1917 that holds us most significant. Here, a combination of over-ambitious aims, appalling weather conditions, and misguided persistence by Haig led to the horrific causes. By the time the total casualties for both sides had been approximately 250,000. The horrors of the battle, in which men drowned in liquid mud, had become synonymous with the images of the war. One of the central objectives, the village of Pasciende, lent its name to the whole conflict. Now back to you, Mina!
For all that interesting information. And finally, our last slur of information about a battle lies with Diana.
1st of July 1916, after a week-long artillery bombardment launched the now infamous Big Push attack across the River Somme, with the French army begin hard-pressed to the south of Verdun. The British intended to break through the German defenses in a matter of hours. The mistrust that High Command had of the so-called new armies manifested itself in orders to the troops to keep uniform lines and to march towards the enemies across no man's land. This, coupled with the failure of the artillery bombardment to dislodge much of the German wire or to destroy their machine gun posts, led to one of the biggest slaughters in military history. When the attack began, the Germans dragged themselves out of the dugouts, manned their posts, and destroyed the oncoming waves of British infantry. On the first day, with the gain of only 1.5 kilometers, the British had suffered 58,000 casualties. Despite this, Haig pressed on with the attack until November 19th of the same year. For the meager achievements, total loss on the British and Imperial side numbered with 400,000, with German casualties between 500,000 and 700,000. With the offense was eventually called off, and the British were still 3 miles short of Bapaume and Surrey, part of their first day objectives. And back to you, Mina.
Imperialism is defined as the control of one people by another, politically, economic exploitation, or imposition of culture on another group. This has not only played a large part in the creation of the alliance system, but it also created enemies for many countries, which led to the Solid Ground War. There had been lots of change in the home front of America, such as the work women had done for this war. The American Expeditionary Force had traveled abroad to France to fight this war. The 369th Regiment was the first African-American military troop to fight in the war. Germany had nicknamed them the Hellfighters for their extreme combat.
The Supreme President of Militarism, a policy of aggressive military preparedness in this period of time, gave all countries great reason to feel the heavy weight of an oncoming war. Great Britain's naval policy, to always be twice as big as the next 2 largest navies put together, along with the predominant feeling of war, provided countries with a strong reason to try and create an incredibly strong military force. This led to an arms race, which made the impending war seem inevitable. So now the final great battle on which America had taken part in, the Meuse Argonne Offensive.
The ADF's goal was to break through the German line and block the German supply rail line as a communication with Germany, and American soldiers took part in the final assault. And now I have just received breaking news that Germany agreed to a truce on November 11, 1919. This can mean the end of the war. America forever. Thank you for watching WZZ News.
This has been a special report.